In 1992, EMD controlled 70% of the locomotive market. By 2007, they had just 15%. EMD was General Motors' electromotive division, based in LaGrange, Illinois. They had over 7,000 workers building locomotives around the clock. They turned American railroads from steam to diesel in under 20 years, and then their own parent company destroyed them. While General Electric was pouring billions into new locomotive technology, General Motors was bleeding EMD dry. They slashed the research budget from around $200 million a year to roughly $50 million by 1995, a 75% cut in under a decade. Then came 2005. General Motors posted $8.6 billion in losses. They needed cash fast, so they sold EMD to a private equity group. The new owners stripped costs. Then Caterpillar bought what was left and folded it into Progress Rail. Wages got slashed. Plants closed. Work moved overseas. You cannot understand the destruction without seeing how they built this empire. EMD did not dominate through luck. They dominated through engineering that changed everything. By the late 1930s, American railroads were drowning in costs. Steam locomotives needed water every 100 miles. Coal every 200 miles. Massive roundhouses for repairs. Thousands of workers just to keep engines running. Diesel switchers were already proving themselves in rail yards, but nobody had made diesel work for heavy, mainline freight. Mechanical transmissions could not handle the enormous torque loads that long-haul service demanded. EMD tried something different. They made diesel generate electricity. That electricity powered traction motors on the axles. Those motors turned the wheels. A simple idea now, revolutionary, in 1930. In December 1939, EMD rolled out FT number 103, a 4-unit diesel-electric locomotive producing 5,400 horsepower. Then they sent it on an 11-month tour across America, 83,764 miles, 35 states, 20 railroads. The real test came at Raton Pass, New Mexico, a brutal 3.5% grade that crushed steam locomotives. The FT pulled 66 loaded freight cars up and over with no helper engines and no water stops. Santa Fe executives ran the numbers. The diesel cost 47% less per ton mile. They ordered 20 units before the tour finished. The war proved it further. FT units hauled military freight around the clock with minimal downtime, while steam needed vast crews and infrastructure. By the time peace came, railroads were ready to convert. An EMD diesel cost more up front, but maintenance ran about 8 cents per mile compared to 21 cents for steam. Most railroads saw full payback inside 4 years. By 1955, over 90% of new locomotive orders were diesel-electric. Now, EMD had to supply an entire industry. Railroads needed locomotives for everything: passenger service, freight, switching, and mountain grades. Most builders specialized. EMD took a different approach. They built versatile machines. The F units defined diesel passenger service for a generation. But freight was where the real money lived. In 1949, EMD introduced the GP7, one locomotive that could work a switching yard in the morning and haul mainline freight by afternoon. They built 2,729 of them. You can see what this meant by looking at Union Pacific. By the early 1950s, UP was running over 40 different locomotive types. Their Cheyenne shops stocked 150,000 different parts. Their chief mechanical officer made the call: standardize on EMD. Over the next decade, UP bought more than 800 EMD units. Parts inventory dropped 60%. Maintenance signs fell 40%. This wasn't loyalty. This was profit. Other railroads copied it. For the heaviest work, EMD built the SD series. In 1972, they introduced the SD40-2. Nearly 4,000 were built through 1989. It became one of the most widely used freight locomotives in North American history. EMD dominated because they built better locomotives. The 567 engine series could run upwards of 300,000 miles between major overhauls. Some competitors were rebuilding at 100,000. When Alco's 244 engine started failing catastrophically, railroads went straight to EMD. By 1957, EMD held 89% of the market. Through the 1960s and into the 1970s, they still held between 70 and 90%. Not because of monopoly pricing, because their locomotives cost less to run and broke down less often. Simple as that. EMD built their empire on excellence. Every metric favored them. Every railroad knew it. But back in Detroit, General Motors executives were starting to ask a dangerous question. How much can we pull out of this division before we have to put anything back in? Their car divisions were hemorrhaging money. Japanese competition was crushing them. They needed cash. And EMD was generating massive profits every quarter. So General Motors made EMD a cash cow. Extract the profits. Send the money to Detroit. Let the locomotive division coast on its reputation. Before we continue, if you are enjoying the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Now back to the video. For a while, the coasting was invisible. The SD40-2 had become America's default freight locomotive. That success carried EMD's reputation well into the 1980s, even as General Motors tightened the budget behind the scenes. But Dash 2 was an incremental improvement, polishing existing technology rather than building anything new. You can see the damage in one number. In 1990, EMD's research budget sat at around $200 million a year. By 1995, General Motors had cut it to roughly $50 million. That was a 75% reduction. While General Electric was pouring billions into new technology, General Motors was draining EMD dry. The first crack showed up in 1981. EMD introduced the SD50 with an upgraded 645F engine. Railroads trusted EMD, and they ordered more than 400 units. The SD50 became the worst product EMD ever built. The 645F had been pushed to maximum output without adequate development time. Bearings failed. Turbochargers blew apart. Electrical systems overheated. Locomotives that railroads expected to run 300,000 miles were breaking down at 100,000. Burlington Northern pulled their entire SD50 fleet in 1985 for emergency rebuilds. Conrail returned units for repairs so extensive EMD essentially rebuilt them from scratch. 40 years of bulletproof reliability, the entire foundation of their market dominance, shattered by a locomotive that never should have left the factory floor. Then came the brain drain. Through the 1980s, General Motors kept cutting staff at LaGrange. Engineers who had spent entire careers in diesel locomotive technology got laid off to meet cost targets. Those engineers did not disappear. General Electric hired them. Better salaries, bigger budgets. General Motors was literally paying to develop its own competitors' workforce. Meanwhile, General Electric was patient. They learned from every failure. And while General Motors extracted billions from EMD, General Electric reinvested every dollar into the next generation. The first real showdown came in 1977. General Electric introduced their Dash 7 line and claimed 5 to 7% better fuel efficiency. The advantage came down to basic engine architecture. General Electric's 4-stroke FDL burned fuel more completely than EMD's 2-stroke design. Burlington Northern ran head-to-head tests. Same trains, same routes, same conditions. General Electric matched EMD on reliability and delivered the fuel savings. Now think about what that means if you are running a major railroad. A few percentage points of fuel savings across hundreds of locomotives running around the clock adds up to millions every year. Multiply that over a decade, and no purchasing department can ignore it. EMD's response was slow and insufficient. They counted on loyalty to hold the line. Then, the SD70 made things worse. Early units suffered software glitches that caused erratic throttle response and unexpected shutdowns. After the SD50, railroads had zero tolerance. One failure was a crisis. Two looked like a pattern. You can see the whole story at Burlington Northern. BN had been EMD's most loyal customer for decades. Their shops were tooled for EMD. Switching meant retraining, retooling, and risk. They switched anyway. BN ran coal trains out of Wyoming around the clock. Every fraction of fuel efficiency translated directly into profit. In 1993, GE introduced the AC 4400 size CW. AC traction motors meant heavier trains with fewer locomotives. EMD responded with the SD70 Mac, but GE's units consistently pulled heavier loads on comparable fuel. By 1995, BN's new orders ran 70% GE. Their most loyal customer had committed to the competition. The defections accelerated. In the early 1990s, EMD held roughly 70% of the market. By 2000, they had dropped to 40%. By mid-decade, GE controlled close to 2/3, a complete reversal in 15 years. By 2005, GM faced a choice: pour billions back in or sell. They were posting $8.6 billion in losses. They sold EMD to Greenbrier Equity Group and Berkshire Partners. A division that had generated billions in profit over decades was gone at whatever price GM's desperation allowed. Private equity did not save it. Market share kept falling. In 2010, Caterpillar's Progress Rail bought EMD for roughly $1 billion. They talked about building a global locomotive leader. The focus shifted immediately to services and rebuilds, not innovation. Then came London, Ontario. In 2012, Caterpillar's EMD plant there employed over 450 workers. Some had spent 20 or 30 years on that floor. Caterpillar demanded a 50% wage cut. The workers rejected it. 10 days after the lockout, the plant closed permanently. Production moved to non-union facilities at lower wages. Caterpillar was profitable. This was extraction, dressed up as restructuring. Production moved to Muncie, Indiana, non-union, and with lower wages. This was not a struggling company making hard choices to survive. The same pattern GM had established was now being repeated by the new owner. If you had walked through EMD LaGrange plant in the 1970s, you would have seen the largest locomotive factory in the world. Over 7,000 workers across 3 shifts, 30 to 40 new locomotives rolling off the line every month, 160 acres of foundries, machine shops, assembly lines, and engineering laboratories. That plant was the beating heart of American locomotive manufacturing. Walk through it today, and most of it stands quiet. Production runs at a fraction of its former capacity. New locomotive builds number in the dozens per year, not hundreds. The workforce that once exceeded 7,000 has been scattered across Progress Rail facilities around the country. What remains at LaGrange is primarily a rebuild and refurbishment operation. And here is what makes it sting. The SD42s that EMD built between 1972 and 1989, nearly 4,000 of them, are still out there hauling freight across the United States. Some are over 50 years old. Rebuilt, yes, but still working, still earning revenue, still proving that the engineers at LaGrange built them to last generations. The locomotives outlasted the company that made them. That is how good the engineering was. and that is how badly the corporate stewardship failed. The contrast with GE tells you everything. Same industry, same time period, completely different priorities. GE invested billions in new technology and grew its market share from single digits to dominance. Its locomotive division eventually merged into Wabtec, a company now valued in the tens of billions. EMD was starved of research funding, sold off, resold for roughly $1 billion, and watched its market share collapse to between 10 and 20%. Today, Wabtec controls 70 to 80% of the North American locomotive market. Progress Rail's EMD division holds 10 to 20%. EMD survived. It eventually met EPA Tier 4 emission standards. It still builds locomotives, but the technology leadership is gone, and the market dominance is gone. Annual production that once topped 1,000 units now sits between 40 and 80 units. The company that revolutionized American railroading, that turned an entire industry from steam to diesel in under 20 years, that held nearly 90% of the market through pure engineering excellence, now earns most of its revenue fixing and refurbishing the locomotives its engineers built decades ago. Every number in this story represents a choice. GM chose to extract instead of invest. Private equity chose to strip costs instead of rebuild. Caterpillar chose services over innovation. And an American industrial giant that once had no equal now survives on the reputation of machines. Its best people built before the accountants took over. Engineering outlasted all of them. EMD's engineers revolutionized American railroading. They replaced entire infrastructure with cleaner, more efficient, and more reliable technology. They dominated through genuine engineering excellence. Then came the greed. GM slashed research and development budgets from $200 million to $50 million, a 75% cut. Meanwhile, GE invested billions in four-stroke engines, AC traction, and microprocessor controls. The result? Market share collapsed from 70% in 1992 to 15% by 2007. A $3 billion collapse in lost orders. EMD's two-stroke 710 engine could not match GE's four-stroke fuel economy. Their electronics lagged years behind. SD70 quality problems destroyed decades of reliability. Reputation. GM sold during its worst year ever, $8.6 billion in losses. EMD was expendable. Private equity tried to stabilize and failed. Caterpillar bought it. Then came the wage cuts, the plant closures, and the outsourcing. In London, Ontario, 450 workers were locked out. The plant was permanently closed. A 50% wage cut demand was rejected. Locked out. The pattern is simple. Take a successful engineering division, starve it of investment, extract profits, watch competitors close the gaps, lose market share, and sell the wreckage. EMD built locomotives still hauling freight 50 years later. SD42s from the 1970s still work because engineers built them right. But GM's accountants, private equity managers, and Caterpillar's CFO could not see past quarterly reports. From 89% market share to 15%. From 7,000 workers to scattered hundreds. From the world's largest locomotive factory to a parts supplier. That's what greed does. These are not opinions, they are facts. Market data, employment records, production numbers, public record.